Do you remember when you were just a child? Maybe you were around like 7, 8, 9 years old, and you were either, depending on what part of the world you lived in, but maybe you were living in the northern hemisphere where you had snow. And do you remember as a little kid just making snow angels or playing in the snow? Perhaps it was jumping in a big pile of leaves. Right now, here in upstate New York, it's almost fall time. The leaves are falling off the trees. And so just imagine a huge pile of leaves and you're just jumping in them. Or perhaps you can remember when you were 7, 8, or 9 and you were riding your bike down the street and you just remember the wind blowing in your hair. And maybe at one point you got very courageous and you decided to ride your bike no handed. And do you recall during these experiences, if you had it, this feeling of being utterly connected to the present moment? And you felt so free to just be your true self. You weren't worried about what people thought of you, or you weren't concerned about being judged. You just felt so free to just be yourself. I'm Kim Gross, the host of Masks Off for People Pleasers and Perfectionists. That little scenario that I just described for you is a story that I outline in my new book, which I'm so excited to tell you about, which is called Free to Be, a Pathway to Inner Liberation. And pre-orders are going to be available on October 1st, and the release date is October 15th. So in my book, Free to Be, I talk about how before the age of 10, I had those experiences. I remembered what it felt like to make a snow angel and just feel so connected to the moment. I also remember when I used to go to my aunt and uncle's lake house about an hour from where I lived. And I went there every summer from the age of 5 until I was 17. And I'm telling you, the day that school got out, the very next day, I had my mom drive me an hour and a half away with my suitcase in hand and all my clothes, and I stayed the entire summer with my aunt and uncle. They didn't have any kids of their own. It was just me. And I can remember this place being one of the most beautiful places I had ever visited. So some mornings, many mornings actually, I would wake up, and you know how if you've ever been to a lake or a river, and when it's early in the morning, everything is like calm, so calm and peaceful. And the lake was like a mirror. It was like glass. You could look down into the water and see your reflection. That's how clear, that's how still the water would be in the mornings and sometimes in the evenings. But usually during the day, there was tons of waves because there were motorboats and people on the lake. So it was choppier. But in the mornings, that was like the best time. So I would take the rowboat out. Now at this point, I'm probably maybe around 8 years old when I started going out in the rowboat by myself. And I would take the rowboat out, unhook it, get the oars in. And I can just remember like it was yesterday. I embody what it was like in that moment of just putting one oar in the water at a time and just and pulling the oar and rowing and doing it so methodically. And what I felt at the time when I did that, one oar after the other, dropping it in the water, pulling the water, drop it in the water, pulling the water. What I remember, and I did not have the language for it at the time because I just didn't know. It's in hindsight that I understand what I felt, which was how connected to the present moment I was, how connected to nature I was. And inadvertently, or therefore, I was so connected to my true self. Nothing else mattered in those moments. And when I had those moments and I felt that way, I felt alive. I felt peaceful. I felt connected. I felt loved. So and I'm grateful. I'm so grateful for those experiences because it allowed me to have a framework to compare what would happen later on. And not only that, but it's a framework that can help me now as an adult return to that feeling and return to that place once I've learned how to take off the masks. So, what ended up happening is that as time went on, 10 years old, 11 years old, went through puberty, started to get caught up in comparing myself to my classmates, and just slowly started to lose touch with my true self. And I started to wear masks. I started to put on a mask to cover my true self because it did not feel safe for a number of reasons that I'll go into in other episodes. I have shared, if you are an avid follower of this podcast, you may even know my story. You may even know the reasons why I started to wear a mask. But it happens to so many of us, right? It happens to most of us. Very few of us escape childhood without, on some level, some way, shape, or form. And it's on a continuum, I'm sure. It's not all or nothing for everybody. But on this continuum, this place of starting to feel it's not safe and okay to be your true self. So you start to pretend to be someone who you're not. You start to do things to please others. You start to look for validation on the outside of yourself as a child because you are learning through either caregivers, peers, teachers, or even society that when you show up as your true and authentic self, if it doesn't align or coincide with what others expect, then in some way, shape, or form, you're shamed, you're reprimanded, you're told it's not okay. And so that's why we start to put the masks on because we are learning or being told that we can't be our true selves. And so this happened for me as time continued to go on, 10 years old, 11 years old, teenagehood, even young adulthood, getting married, becoming a mom. I continued to have experiences and then belief systems that reinforced it was not okay to show up as my true self. The more I felt disconnected from myself, I couldn't be my authentic self. And so I started to have anxiety, started to suffer from some depression, and certainly learning all kinds of coping techniques to numb the pain of cutting off from myself, of the pain of not being able to just be me and be who I was meant to be in this world. And so that's why I have this mission of masks off, like this masks off mission through my podcast, through my book, and through speaking opportunities, because I want to have everyone hear this message and to understand and become aware that it's our birthright to be our true selves. Think about it, right? I write about this in my book. As 2-year-olds, if we had like food all over our shirt, or we had dirt all over ourselves. Our hair was a mess. We didn't care what other people thought about that. We were just so present in our bodies. We weren't worried about judgment and criticism because we were 2 years old. And so, what I want to be able to help people to understand and to learn and become aware of is that we need to return back to that place. We need to be able to come back to the place where we feel it is our birthright. We have this unshakable confidence that who we are is inherently good and that we are worthy of being our true selves. Does that mean that we're always going to be perfect? Of course not. That's the whole point, is that we understand that we are imperfect and it is okay to be imperfect and show up that way. And that's the problem, because when we were kids, it's one of the problems. When we were kids, we were told if we were crying or we were upset or we weren't behaving perfectly, we were reprimanded and told that's not how you're supposed to behave. Little boys need to be quiet, more quiet. You need to stop running around, stop crying, or whatever the messages were that you received or we received. And then what happens is for like teenagers, I really feel for the teenage and young adolescent population because I feel like they're struggling the most. They are just really trying to find themselves in the world and they have no idea on really how to put their true selves forward. They're always trying to censor what they say or how they show up, whether it be through athletics or sports or what college you're getting into and what instrument you play. And then if you don't measure up to any of those, if you're a teenager that doesn't excel, hasn't had all the accolades, then you're labeled as a troublemaker or you're a loser. You might even be a dropout. In fact, when I was a teacher, when I taught high school before my son was born, I taught the at risk kids. These were the kids that it was their last ditch effort before dropping out, being in my class. And just the fact that they were called the at risk kids is a label right there. That's just putting them into a box saying you're at risk, you failed so many classes, you've gotten in trouble, you're doing drugs, you're this, you're that, and the other thing. And those kids just didn't know how to be their true selves. They didn't know how they were wearing that mask. So it really is, in my opinion, it really is a travesty and it is an epidemic almost to see these young kids with the amount of stress and pressure that they have to just figure out how to fit in when really what we all want is true belonging. We want to know that we are worthy of belonging to the world as our true selves without masks. In fact, Brene Brown writes about the difference or talks about the difference between fitting in and belonging. And I quote her in my book, and I'll share it with you because it's important to highlight and underpin the difference between wanting to fit in and wanting to belong. So, this is what Brene Brown says. She says, the thing is that we are wired to be a part of something bigger than us so deeply that sometimes we will take fitting in as a substitute. But actually, fitting in is the greatest barrier to belonging because fitting in says, be like them to be accepted. And belonging says, this is who I am. I hope we can make a connection. So I love that quote because it so beautifully distinguishes between fitting in and true belonging, and it really outlines what it means to truly belong. And that's what we desire. That's what our kids want. They want to know that they belong, that they're worthy, that they matter, regardless of their grades, the accolades, the sports they play, the college they get into, the friends that they hang out with. We as adults truly want to know that we are worthy, that we matter, that we belong, regardless of what the scale says, the zip code that we live in, the amount of money we have in the bank, the kind of cars that we have, the house that we live in, the type of job that we have. We want to know that underneath all of that, if you stripped it all away, do you believe that you are worthy? Do you believe that you matter regardless of all those things? Think about that. Ask yourself that question. And if you can get to the place where you believe that you matter no matter what, no matter how much you weigh, what your kids are doing, when you can get to that place of knowing that you matter no matter what, that is when you will be free to just be. And that's why I titled my book, Free to Be, a Pathway to Inner Liberation. If you want to have peace, inner peace, real deep inner peace, freedom, joy, abundance, you have to get to a place where you can recognize when you're wearing a mask, learn how to unmask, which means AKA, and I'll talk about this in future episodes, but it means unhooking from the patterns that you're living and doing the healing work. You have to heal those childhood wounds, those past wounds that are telling you that you need to wear a mask in order to be okay. And when you can do all of that, then you have the opportunity to have true freedom, to be truly who you are, and to live a life from wholeness rather than living a life with a mask on. So, if you want to hear more about my stories, my personal stories, I have to tell you that in this book, Free to Be, I am very vulnerable. I share a lot of personal stories. I'm very transparent. And I do this for a reason. One, because I have to walk the walk, right? I talk about taking off your mask. That's what my podcast is all about, is taking off the mask. So I'm walking the walk, I take off my mask, and sometimes I'm like, "Holy crap, what did I just do?" But at the end of the day, it's my hope, it's my desire, it's my wish that everyone that picks up my book and reads it will feel inspired to start taking off the masks and be your true self, because you all deserve to know that it's your inherent birthright to know that you're worthy and that you matter no matter what. So if you want to get a copy of my book, Free to Be, A Pathway to Inner Liberation, pre-orders start on October 1st. Now, here's the thing. If you go to my website and you pre-order on October 1st, from October 1st to the 15th, you will get a bonus. You'll get a free gift for pre-ordering. And then regular sales start on October the 15th. The book will be officially released. If you do pick up the book and you read it and you have feedback, I invite you to leave me a review on Amazon, or you can just email me a review or comment, let me know something, because I would love to hear what your thoughts are from reading my book. And I just want to say again, for all of you who listen to Masks Off for People Pleasers and Perfectionists who have been regular followers, thank you so much. I so appreciate your support. And I would love to hear from you. If you have questions, if you have comments, if there's something more you want to hear about in some of the episodes, if you have any feedback at all, I would love to hear it. I am open and I am willing, even if it like hurts a little bit, it hurts the ego if it's not good feedback. At the end of the day, I do want to continue to grow this podcast and I want to be able to bring to you what you're looking for. What do you need most from this type of podcast? And share it with me. Okay, until next time, everybody, take care.